That's just
Test,
yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah, that's all.
Okay, that's all, right?
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Library of Mistakes, my fellow errorists. My name is Russell Napier. I'm the keeper of the Library of Mistakes. And just a few initial announcements. For those of you who haven't been before, this is a free public library. If you'd like to come, then go to the website, register as a reader, and arrange a visit. And you can come and use the facilities here. You'll also then be notified about all the lectures and all the podcasts, and you will officially be an errorist. Just be careful how you put that into Google, because the spell check can change it into something else. And if you have an accent like mine, that can be quite dangerous. So tonight we have some books for sale. Just to remind you, you can make a donation at the back of the room. This is all financed really by running a course in finance. So if you think the time is right for you to take a course in finance, we do that in person in London in November. We also do it online, and we've got a slight discount running until the middle of July. So if you want to do that, speak to David, who's the man at the back of the room. You can find details on the website. We have a few places left for next week. We're going to discuss gross national happiness, how to measure it or not, with a Buddhist nun from Bhutan, who is an expert on measuring happiness. Presbyterians should also attend. I will not be chairing that because I've got no personal experience of happiness. So, there speaketh the Calvinist. But tonight, we're delighted to do something slightly different. People always ask me what this library is about, and it's stating the obvious. It's about business and financial history, but business and financial history is a subset of a much wider sphere, and that wider sphere is human decision-making under uncertainty, which we all do. We do it when we cross the road. You do it if you're in business. You do it if you're in urban planning. We are all doing it all the time. And you may recognize those words, because those are the words that the Nobel Prize Committee used in awarding the Nobel Prize to Daniel Kahneman, a psychologist who won the Nobel Prize or the Riksbanks Prize for economics. Not an economist, but a psychologist. So we are intending to broaden things out a little bit, look at other people and other professions that have to do this human decision-making under uncertainty. And therefore tonight we're delighted to welcome Dr. Mae East. She's a doctor of urban planning, an educator, long-term involvement with the United Nations, long-term resident of Edinburgh. And this is our first ever speaker who brings mistakes, but also solutions. And we're going to get to that at the end. So Mae, over to you.
Thank you, Russell. Thank you very much. Good evening. I'm convinced that the future of humanity and the biosphere is going to be decided in the cities of the world. Cities today cover 4% of the surface of the planet, and they account to 80% of global energy consumption, 75% of carbon emissions, and over 80% of consumption of nutrients. From this 4%, when you imagine put all the cities together, they cover only 4% of the surface of the planet. From the 4%, 1.8, 2%, nearly 50% are dedicated to roads and parking lots. And that's the core of our conversation today, tonight, this afternoon. So this conversation will have three movements. First, we're going to start discussing why this conversation is important, what's the relevance, what if women design the city right now, 2024. We're going to go back into history in order to go forward. So there'll be three movements, and then there are going to be plenty of opportunities for us to engage into conversation. And I hope you understand my Brazilian English okay. If not, please let me know. So, why is this important? Most recently, at the UN, you have agenda holders and you have knowledge brokers. So, this conversation takes place at the intersection of three mega trends informing the world we live in. The accelerated pace of urbanization of humanity. We build a new Paris every 5 days in the planet right now. So the rapid urbanization of the human population. We are 50%, 52% living in cities. The projection is 72% in 2050, which is just around the corner. So this is a mega trend. What is a mega trend? A mega trend is a trend that evolves, steadily, 10, 20, 30 years. The second one is repositioning of women in society, which is another mega trend. And the third one, this imperative or the decarbonization of our lifestyles. And at the UN, you have the agenda holders, like UN Women holds the repositioning of women in society, UN Habitat, the urbanization, IPCC, the decarbonization, but you also have the knowledge brokers, those who influence conversations. And those who influence conversations such as World Bank, OECD, they recently launched some reports reaffirming that cities have been built historically by using men's experience as a reference. As a result, cities work better for men than they do for women, children, older people, all levels of ableness and gender identities. A series of other reports coming up, more recent, and this coming from financial institutions and also research institutions such as MIT, revealing more and more how active travel or soft mobility, which is another way of, when you move with your own energy, active travel, soft moving, is changing the face of the cities. So you have real estate agents, they like MIT. This quote I found recently, say, I'm completely bored from MIT, a director of city science. I'm completely bored with smart city IoT systems, Internet of Everything systems that try to optimize the flow of traffic so you get more throughput of cars. I'm more interested in getting rid of cars in cities. So there is this, these are mega trends. These are people talking about that. But before we deepen this conversation, I'd like to invite us to make a collective decision and hold three awareness that I believe are alive in this room. So the decision is about not using an old map to explore a new territory. This means that despite the fact that cities historically been built, planned, developed, taking the male experience as a model, we do not hold a zero-sum universe where women's protagonism in urban planning means other genders losing out. Here we're talking about women working alongside men to redistribute power, to rebalance representation, and change legal and planning systems for cities that work for all. We're talking about working with this perspective of co-evolving mutualism, where women and cities are implicated in the construction of one another towards those cities that work for all. So that's the decision. In terms of awareness, starting with future scenarios, right now, we have hundreds of scenarios ahead of us. If we're going to grow from 1.3 centigrades to 1.3 centigrades, what's happening to the coastal cities, what's going to happen to biodiversity, hundreds of scenarios projected by big data analysts, climate scientists, urbanists, economists, hundreds of scenarios. Every time I come from the headquarters, I come already with what is the scenario ahead of us? But we can synthesize all the scenarios in two. Transition is going to happen. Either we're going to design it, or we are going to be victims of it. And we are in the business of designing the transition. And when we talk about design, we're talking about a collective exercise of envisioning, conceiving, imaging how to redesign our human presence in our urban environments, and after all, in the planet. So that's the first awareness. The second awareness is regarding direction of travel. We all know that sustainability is not enough anymore. How can we sustainably bring back something that we have already lost? Here, we have to bring a regenerative way of work, bringing more life, more vitality, more viability to every decision, all the decisions that Russell said that we take every day. How these 3,500 decisions I take every day, how can I bring more life, more vitality? And viability is vitality over time. And when we start working regeneratively, bringing more life, we start working with lifelines, not deadlines anymore. That's the second awareness. The third awareness is regarding mindset. I know we are in the library of mistakes. However, here, in terms of mindset, we're going to let go the problem-solving mindset. Instead, we're going to work with the notion of potential. There's always more potential than can be realized. Potential grounded in what I call the biocultural spatial uniqueness of place. What does it mean? The potential that there is in Portobello is not the potential that is in Western Hales. So potential is always grounded in place. So here, despite the fact that we are, going to be investigating, the wrong of the past, we're saying that we are focusing our collective gaze on what is strong and build upon potential. So this is the third awareness. So, back into history. Okay, are you following me okay? Yeah? Can we continue? Okay, so we're going to go back a little bit in history in order to identify some of the wrongs and then start projecting the potential of the wrongs. And Rumi, the Persian poet, would say there's 1,001 ways of kneeling and kissing the ground. I would say there's 1,001 ways to tell the story that I'm telling you tonight. This is, what comes after is science. This is storytelling. When I talk about my research and the leverage points, that has been verified, robust science. Here's about storytelling. There are 1,001 ways of telling the story, but just to contextualize. So we start by Britain emerging from the Second World War, victorious but bankrupt. The housing provision was not only lacking in quality, in quantity, was also lacking in quantity, both quantity and quality. The 20 years after this moment in history has seen unprecedented change in terms of mobility and housing stock. And we're going to see briefly what happened. Of course, the government was responsible in giving housing for its citizens, houses that have been demolished by the war, but also those overpopulated tenements that we hear the stories in Edinburgh. You know, there's two types. There was rooms with 8 people, very poor sanitation, not fresh air. There was, the clock was ticking, and they needed to relocate the people. 12 people in a room, 8 people in a room. There was cholera. There was epidemic. There was a need to build new houses. So the architects of the time start thinking, how are we going to do this relocation and building, baby boom and all of that? Time was short. Budgets were tight. And bricks were scarce. So they decided for concrete. It became the material of choice of young architects. There has been already great examples happening in the continent with concrete. And a new architecture style was born called brutalism. People think that is because it was brute. It was brute with no ornamentation. But it came from béton brut, which is raw concrete. So we decided to start building with raw concrete. You know that concrete today is the second most used material after water in the planet. With steel, concrete has a huge domain. Yes, so it was not by chance that they start to be inspired by what was happening in the continent with a whole generation of architects that were designing functional buildings with Le Corbusier as one of their leaders. Just in 57, 60, started, you know, they opened up the Cité Radieuse in Marseille. Le Corbusier and his generation, they created this modular system. The modular system was to guide and inform all decisions in buildings and heights of ceilings and doors and mirrors according to the human proportion. Of course, at that stage was the male human proportion. I recently went to revisit La Cité Radieuse in Marseille 3 weeks ago, and I wanted to put some lipstick because there was a restaurant. I had a lunch, and then I went. And then when I went to the toilet, and I could not believe, I started laughing because I need to put like this in order to find myself. And I photographed myself trying to put the lipstick. It was still there. It was the height which was used. That was, I wouldn't say, you know, men design at that stage cities, say they were determined, let's design cities that don't work for women and children. It's just that there was not enough representation. Architects, urban planners, and all that. There were 92, 87, 94% of these occupations were occupied by men. So very much inspired by what was happening there. And of course, not by chance that the modernist functional buildings that started in the continent and gained space in Britain and in the global north evolved in tandem with the motorization, with the mergers of vehicles running with engines and based on fossil fuel. So this came together in the development of sprawling suburbia in the global north, modernist buildings was based on this mobility and also the increase of car ownership. So this all came together. And one of the examples I can bring to you, around the corner, southwest of Edinburgh, Wester Hailes. It was, you know, part of the slum clearance that happened in Edinburgh and in Glasgow and in London and many of the big cities, the slum clearances, taking those families out of those little rooms and giving at that stage was an upgrade. Let's, you know, let's bring more function for their lives, and those families that were living there for a long time, they were all transported, relocated for this sort of buildings. And the planners of that time, they wouldn't think that what they were doing was going to have a huge social impact. But there's a documentary from Channel 4 interviewing women of that time that say what the planners gave us, it was all that they gave us, was buildings and parking lots. For each one of the flats, there were 2 parking lots, because it was an assumption that people will move out of the very alive old town and move there, and they will have their cars to be commuting to the city center. That was the pattern. So the pioneers of modernist design believed that by making architecture more functional, it will lead to social and economic improvement, ultimately creating a better world. 20 years later, of course, they were cutting corners. Remember saying there were not so much a budget? So that idea that concrete, brute concrete, the strong concrete started like 5 years later, 7 years later, start having structural problems, leakages in balconies, flooding happening. And 18 of those blocks had to be demolished. And after that, up to today, they had layers and layers and layers of regeneration taking place in Wester Hailes. So, moving from out of the contextualization of our conversation to say, okay, so how, taking consideration this mass motorization and modernist style that start really informing our cities, taking in consideration that 50% of the 4% of the cities are roads and car parks, and that we have this imperative of decarbonizing our lifestyles. I went into research. I wanted to know, what if women design the city? From now on, what would happen? And the first realization is that if women design the city, cities will be designed for proximity, not for motorized mobility. And in order to do that, I didn't want to have my ideas, because I've been working with cities for many, many years. I wanted to hear from the women themselves. So I decided to do walking interviews, 3 Scottish cities, in every city, and seeing women as experts of their neighborhoods. In every city, I wanted to walk with women from an affluent neighborhood and a hard-to-reach neighborhood. I didn't want one of the sectors of women being informing how city would look like. So, for instance, in Edinburgh, I work with women from Portobello and also from Wester Hailes, Drumchapel, York Hill, and Kelvin Grove in Glasgow, and in Perth as well. So I work with 274 women. I created an app. I had a huge amount of data, spatial data, audio data, and visual data. And I said, okay, so what do I do after I have walked 274 women? I decided, looking at cities as organized complexities, I said, in order to work with organized complexity, you need a systems perspective. So I chosen Donella Meadows' framework of leverage points. Donella Meadows is an environmental scientist from the Club de Rome, and she said there are places in a complex system where a small shift in one thing can produce big changes in everything. So I decided to organize all this data into leverage points. And I reached out into 33 leverage points that women, as experts of their neighborhoods, but I never wanted women to come up with a list of things that city would work with, their neighborhoods, their areas would work well. That was a responsibility of somebody else to realize. So I created a regenerative framework of inquiry where I started asking them, as soon as I start walking, say, what is unique about your neighborhood? So when you start the conversations, say, what is the problem of your neighborhood? Then you start talking about the problem and who is going to solve your problem. It's going to be the council who has the tarmac strategy. Every time there is a green that they cannot manage, they come with tarmac. You know, it's a different way of talking. So the how to engage was already in a regenerative way. What is unique? So you start building what is unique. And from the uniqueness, you then say, what is the potential that you see here that you haven't seen before? And then that's already, you know, started. And walk interviews is like spatially, you create a possibility of serendipities or observations. Instead of sitting in front of somebody, tell me about your neighborhood. So there was all these, you know, multisensory ways of having ideas. So, of course, you're not naive. In an area, in a district, there's not only potential. So you also welcome and say, okay, what are the restraining forces? What are the things that are restraining this potential? And we will look at, identify, and then do a reconciliation. You have the potential, you have the restraining forces, and we can reconcile this because restraints come to kind of probe the potential and help you to refine it, and you reconcile with new lines of work. And then you move the conversation and say, okay, so let's identify the network of responsibilities. So you take women from, oh, I'm a victim, the council is not giving this to me. You say, what is the network? How this potential can be realized through which network of responsibilities? And finally, asking, what's your role in this? So that was a regenerative journey. And talks took from half an hour to 1 hour and a half. They were in control of the research. They start when they start, end when it ends. They took me where they wanted. Of course, we were talking about sense of place, green spaces, active travel, and safety. But now, instead of, I've already spoken a lot, and instead of me saying, wow, this was leverage point 1, this is 3 and 5, I created some flashcards with the 33 leverage points. So in one side, we have a picture of the leverage point. So this one is called Cultivating Biophilia, Love for Nature. By the way, these are all the ideas. This was the leverage points, the synthesis of the women. One side you have a picture, and the other side you have some bullet points of what are the main. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask Russell to help me here, and David as well. We're going to distribute one for each one of you, and I'm going to give you like 2 minutes for you to read, and then you're going to go to the right or to the left, and you explain your card to your person, the other person explain, and then maybe you mingle with somebody else, and so you can hear 2 or 3 leverage points, and then we are doing the harvesting. What do you think about them? So here we go. Oh, just a moment. There's 4 here. No, that's fine. But because I think we have more than 33 people, I got a second set. I'm going to just mingle here so that you don't have 1, 2, 3. welcome. Oh, you have my book. Thank you. Yes. Hello. So nice to see you here. Okay. Hi. Everybody has one? Okay. So 2 minutes to one more. Sorry? Oh, you have a spare one. Okay. Okay, we go. Okay. How are we doing with time?
Very good for time.
Yeah? Okay. Absolutely on time. That's what I was saying. How is so far? How is so far?
Sorry?
How is being so far, you think?
Yeah, excellent.
Okay, so ready? To the right, to the left, explain your card, and hear somebody else telling about the other card. So that is a way of you getting to know. And if you don't have a pair, just stand up and find somebody. This was a picture in Rias. This was like is the board of.
What's obvious is they're all men.
Yes, and this is the headquarters of the Royal Incorporation of Architects.
How is it?
They are all presidents of men. That's why I took this picture. Yeah. There was just one woman, which was here, was not in the picture.
She was the first architect in Scotland, female architect. She's buried in Warriston Cemetery.
Uh-huh.
By the end of this, I'll remember what her name is.
Okay, thanks. Okay. What's the time right now? What's the time now?
Half past.
Okay.
15 minutes, that's fine.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, because I'm going to harvest the insights now.
So I've got the roving mic, so you're going to pick some people out to speak
Yeah,
or whatever.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
You just point me directly.
Yeah, okay.
Signal at 15 minutes past.
Yes, please. Yeah, yeah. 7:15, because then it'll be 15 minutes for questions, right? You're going to probe me in. Okay. If you have finished yours, you can go and meet somebody else and hear another one. If you have already finished, you can stand up and change with somebody else. Look, you can change with somebody else. Just stand up and find somebody else. If you already finished the discussion, you can stand up and find somebody else if you want. Anyway, 3 more minutes for buzzing. What?
Your microphone's on, isn't it?
It's on. Shall I turn it off?
Let me just double check. On the video, people can see. Yeah, it's on.
It was on.
That's good.
I turned it on just in the beginning.
The video is still working, so don't say. So. Subversive, May.
Sorry?
I said this is a bit subversive. I like it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So they build knowledge and they critique now. So nice to see you. Thanks for coming.
This is my friend Robert.
Hi, nice Nice to meet you.
About everybody being quiet.
No. No, remember you said maybe it's...
Maybe they'll be a bit quiet.
Yeah.
Edinburgh, but no.
No. No, they are engaging. I'll give one more minute and call the attention, because I went there, they are still discussing. I'm not sure. I'll put it here.
Wait for the microphone, because there are people watching online.
Okay.
We need the microphone so we can pick up on this.
Okay. Okay. Okay, can I have your attention? Great buzz. I'm going to ask you, say a number between 1 and 33. 12. Who had leverage point number 12? You? Okay, so can you explain what was about? And you can support one another.
Basically, nosy neighbours. It's
What's the name of it?
it's improving natural surveillance by design. It's having that viewpoint that there's someone around to discourage wrongdoing and misbehaviour, but also to improve the feeling of safety.
Mm-hmm. Anything you want to add?
I think that's a really good explanation. Yeah. I think I could add as a viewpoint of someone who's in their 20s and talking about kind of natural surveillance, because I don't even know what my neighbor names are, even though I lived there for 2.5 years. So I feel like as a young people, we're less likely to look out the window or know what's dodgy going on next door or next building, just because we actually don't have much time and space to care about it, because we can look at phones a lot. Mm-hmm. As I thought would be a useful input into the topic.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, if women design the city, safety will be prioritized. But not safety that we imagine like more CCTVs, will be this eyes of the street, the eyes of the passers-by, the neighborhood watch. This is what makes the subjective feeling of safety of women when there is more people. And there was something that was very interesting when leverage point, and the women, because cities will be designed for proximity, not for motorized mobility, women would like to retrain those issuing parking penalties into wardens that belong to the community. Many of the communities, women that I work from the communities, they say, we used to have wardens, community wardens. Now we are policed. So this aspect of, the subjective feeling of safety, having the eyes and community wardens, but also there is one aspect that is designing out crime, which is, there is the natural surveillance, which is the eyes of the passers-by, of the community, and there is a whole science for architecture, which is like how you're going to be placing your windows in front of the door, about illumination, upkeep of vegetation, signage. Women were saying that, I liked when I get into a place, that, welcome, you are in a park. You are in the, reinforcing where you are, signage very clear. Take this route. This is all subtle ways of you working with the city, not putting more CCTVs, more police with cars that come in and out without really having this subtlety. Say a number between 1 and 33, except number 12. 7?
Yeah.
7. Who had the leverage point 7? Somebody had. Have a look. 7? You had.
Yes.
Do you want to say something?
So this is devising a library of women-tailored bike saddles. And the conclusion is that bike shops and communities are invited to develop a library of women-tailored saddles designed to support women's Thank you. What she said. Making cycling a more comfortable experience. So I'm actually curious what's behind this. Is there a shortage in many communities of bike saddles that are designed for women?
Yes.
Because where I live, it seems like that's not a problem, but obviously in other communities it is.
Yeah, well, in UK, men cycle 80% more than women. So when you're talking about active travel, which is traveling with your own power, you start asking, why would you cycle more? And one of the things that women say is that bicycles haven't been designed for, we have ischio bones in our bum, we have a different anatomy. And bicycles haven't been designed so well for women. So that was a realization of women. So for you to know that based on research, 274 women in Scotland. And interesting enough, that was a recurrent pattern. Oh, I don't cycle more because I don't feel comfortable. I don't cycle more. So that was a leverage point that emerged. And in Portobello, just around the corner, about a month ago, based on this research, if you're going to walk in the promenade, now there is a container there, which is a library of saddles for women. So you can try, this one goes, no, this not, no, you can try different ones. This one is the best one for me. Women may be cycling more, may cutting more. This came from there. But maybe where you come from, there is libraries.
Do you know for the cities that sponsor bicycles that are available to hire on the street, the rideshare programs, do they offer different kinds of saddles in those? Or do they offer one that is going to be as comfortable for a woman as for a man?
I think this is a very generalized question. I'm not sure if I can give you a global answer, but there's definitely a trend. And remembering that regenerative design is about leverage points that are unique to the place. So that came unique. That's unique to Edinburgh. There's a need for women identify a need for having more comfortable saddles so that they can enjoy more cycling. Unique from here. I cannot talk about globalized things.
I'd just like to say, as a man, I would love to find a more comfortable bicycle seat.
Good. Good. Okay. Tell us a number then, you, between 1 and 33, except 7 and 12.
No, it was 12. Oh, it was 12. 27.
27. Okay. We're going to get 2 or 3 more, okay? And then we start conversation. Two more? Okay.
So this one is about
one and one?
infusing beauty in cities in form and function. And women are sort of saying that actually beauty is about a sense of wilderness, but a sense of cleanliness as well. So if you go into a space, it needs to be clean, it needs to be inspiring and invite reflection, and it needs to have awakening your sense of place through stimulation of colours, textures, shapes, shadows, sounds and smells, and designing out inequalities so that you don't get some spaces, I guess, that don't feel so attractive to be in because either they're dirty or they're just grey and not very attractive looking.
Yeah, that's very important, particularly from the housing estates in Scotland, because you have these buildings and you have a huge amount of green, but nothing. It's just grass, you know. And I remember women saying, if I could put some flowers there, if I could, something that will kind of bring, but that was one of the insights. The other one was that a recurrent one was like women like to spend time in places contemporary women are not sure about the past or the future, in places that feel more wild, more natural. And now there's this whole movement of no mow on May and things like that. You have, all this pockets of naturalness coming, which is also there is beauty in naturalness. Yeah, it's not, beauty doesn't mean that you need to have everything pruned and organized. So there's beauty in that. We're going to take one more. Who wants to talk about your card because you want to probe me or you like the card? Somebody. Okay.
So it's a very different one. It's not about bikes anymore. So it's about high heels. So if you have wore high heels before, you know that the pavement here is not very suitable. It's very uncomfortable to walk on the pavements. So this one's to suggest to refurbish the pavements to accommodate high heels.
Yeah, it's interesting enough. There's a colleague of mine, a researcher like myself. She did some recent research to see, high heels is been used historically. It started with actually Louis XV. Men used to have high heels before women and all of that. But in Hanoi, I think. There was a campaign by women that they still go to work with high heels, and it was very difficult. And they start doing this soft, you have the same card. Some of you, one of you had a card. You want to add anything? Uh-huh.
If I think back then, in the Middle Ages, you would have had shoes built up so that you could avoid the mess and the dirt and the sewage that ran down the street. So probably before Louis XIV. And I think having rubber crumb incorporated into pavements, we need to get rid of the potholes and the trip hazards first before we worry about walking in high heels.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the vision of the potholes, we have to get rid of all the potholes just to finalize and connect with the beginning of the conversation. There's much, much, much more investment into roads than pavements. That's part of the mindset. And so, although there's lots of potholes, one of the suggestions from the interviewees as well was, and I've been working with transport teams of the councils, was to suggest that the traffic engineers that start looking at the street, how we're going to spend a whole week pushing a pram, or in order to have the experience before they go into the design board in order to start designing. But this is changing. This is changing very fast. And but before we start concluding, I'll pass on to Russell, because I think he's going to be asking some questions from me and a space for you to probe me.
Let me begin with high heels, actually. So they have an important place in Scottish history. Do you want to take a seat? Because they almost single-handedly destroyed the Scottish linoleum industry. But fortunately, the scientists came up with a solution to that. So, and there's an excellent documentary on the BBC iPlayer on the Kirkcaldy linoleum business, which you may have seen, and the threat from high heels that they managed to survive. So what struck me about everything, but the history bit, but also your work, is when we do this human decision-making under uncertainty, it's called availability bias. And it's the easiest thing in the world just to take what's available, the information that's available. And what you're trying to do is reframe this and take other information. So you're starting in a different place. To go back to these men, you pointed out to me earlier on, where is this again?
This was in the Royal Incorporation of Architects Society. It's the presidential room. All the architects in the history of since establishment, this was established in 1896. I think you have something more to say about that. But there is one, in this side of the room, there is one woman.
Okay.
But these are all architects.
So these are all men, but also they didn't really come from the communities that they relocated either. So the availability bias was from men, but men of it from a certain class as well. So your work is to try and get a different form of availability of information to begin the planning process from there. Mm-hmm. When did this start? Because obviously the history of post-war brutalism suggests that it just went on for a very long time. When did it begin to change? Because we have books in here by David Kynaston, who's the historian of post-World War II Britain. And it really seemed to go on for a very, very long time before someone decided to kind of switch the frame.
Well, I'll show you a picture in a moment. I think we started, women and city started, I think, with the Industrial Revolution, actually. Because when women start coming to the cities, and there was not enough space. They start to be, living in these little places and things like that. And what I think is interesting in Scotland is that when the suffragette movement came here, one of the largest marches of suffragette movement that happened in UK, but the largest in Scotland was in Princes Street. What was different here, because the suffragette movement, which was equal rights, vote, and all that, was middle and upper class, was educated women. That's how it started. But here in Scotland, working women joined. That's why it was a huge marches, because working women joined the educated women because they also wanted. So I think there's something around these deep roots of rethinking the relationship, myself and my place, this living in a room with 8 people with no running water and all of that, you wake up your awareness into saying, listen, we need better conditions.
When you say that, I think of Brazil. So you are from Brazil. We obviously had that infamous Brasilia. Can you tell us anything about that? And there seems to be no input from members of the public into the great plan of Brasilia.
No, and I'll tell you something. My first job as a student was to support slum dwellers that have been relocated from their slums to modernist buildings in São Paulo. And I was a young student, and they would come to that buildings, and they were planters using the toilet vase to plant because they didn't know what was a toilet thing. So I was already looking at how you move this organic life that is, full of people, but so much richness, social richness. And how, when you move to a modernist state, it is an upgrade in some senses, but also is a trap. And it does not take in consideration. It was lacking the social design, the care for the community. These places had no amenities, no places to stay together, because women keep saying they want to have places to be together. The way this has influenced us is that the only way of being with one another is consuming. In order to spend time with one another, we need to consume. If women design the city today, they'll create places for being together without needing to consume to be together.
It makes me think of Aldous Huxley. Actually, Huxley may be more accurate than George Orwell in terms of the society we live in. A society constructed to encourage consumption and the price of consumption rather than Orwell. Yeah. I've now forgotten my final question.
Well, you were talking about Brasilia, that was Niemeyer. I mean, you want to talk about using brutalism and raw concrete. Brazil is a huge exemplar on that. And the city was designed when the barrel of crude oil was $1. That's how they designed. There is no pavements. You can't walk the city.
Actually, that was my other question. So this library is full of the uncertainty, the greatest uncertainty of all, the one that we have the most difficulty with actually is technology. Because who can really know where technology will be 30, 40 years from now? So we have to have some sympathy with people who plan cities, because that is the great unknown, if we can quote from the infamous Mr. Rumsfeld. So when you're sitting down to think about a city of the future, how on earth do you begin to think about how technology can change that city? Not just in terms of transport, but it's almost inconceivable to work out where given how quickly things are currently moving, where technology might be 30 years from now?
Well, I'll go back to the quote of MIT. I was invited as a keynote speaker to the Smart City, the International Smart City, and I only think my pitch was about an urbanism of proximity, where technology will not be dedicated for us to have more cars and run longer distances. And I think that was the great legacy of the epidemic, the COVID, because we start living locally, and we start honoring the sense of place, the sense of belonging. And I think that Paris, for instance, is a city of hundreds of villages. They have their identity. Edinburgh also has, I live in Leith, we have identity. You go to Portobello, there's identity. There's nothing more richer than you walk in your neighborhood and knowing where you're buying. And so I think the future of the cities is the cities of villages.
If we take the sort of Fritz Lang village there, or city, one of the things that it was built around was the flying car. And here we are, flying cars just around the corner.
Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, how on earth would you begin to plan a city around the flying car?
Yeah, well, are we going to have all the metals necessary to build all the cars and extraction of these metals? Are we going to do this in a green way and all of that? So I don't know. I think as a woman, I like to see the near future, and the near future is exciting, particularly in Scotland. Scotland is a place where, when you have a topic, because it's a small country, you can put everybody who has a stake, all the stakeholders in the same room. Since I launched my book, the Ministry of Planning has adopted this conversation of gender-sensitive placemaking. So we had a ministerial meeting with 132 urban planners, from the 32 councils. We had a debate at the Parliament. We're having master classes. Every talk I've given so far in Edinburgh and Glasgow, Perth, is being men and women interested in the topic. And I think right now there's this huge interest with what's happening in Vienna, in Umeå in Sweden, in Paris, in Barcelona. These are cities that are taking the gender-sensitive approach to the heart, because designing city for women and girls means that designing cities for all.
Time for me to pass to the floor. We never usually have any problems with questions. I already have one right back.
May, that's been an absolute brilliant talk with lots of food for thought. Thank you very much. But I'd like to ask you a question about connecting things up. And joining a few more dots. You've been talking about cities and the rather frightening figure of how many new cities are just springing up. What's your view on the relationship of cities with nature? Because increasingly cities are encroaching on the natural world to the detriment of that natural world and therefore the detriment of ourselves. And also joining up with what other areas are doing, like you mentioned flying cars. Now, everyone's sort of working on these driverless cars. Well, do we need cars at all? How do we sort of get things to chime in terms of what we want, in terms of what all these companies are doing, what governments might be doing? How do we sort of align them? That's my question.
Thanks. For green spaces, it's very interesting what's happening with the cities that have awakened to its ecological footprint. I just came back from Berlin. I was there for 2 weeks in a series of talks and things, and there is this aspiration and implementation in many cities to start connecting all pockets of green, from gardens to balconies, to boxes, to parks, to flower meadows, to create spaces for wilderness returning, and for people also to start, of all ages, start, in a way, having space to love or be enchanted or nurture ourselves with the beauty of nature, creating this natural corridor. So in Berlin, I went to visit because I was told that they are repurposing cemeteries, because cemeteries are places of green, and they are sometimes they are abandoned. So I went to one of them, which was the most amazing experience. You have all these tombs, but you also have some natural climbers for kids, and lots of kids playing that place, and wild, and you have squirrels and birds and all of that. So I think it's about us connecting, exactly what you said, connecting the places and creating these nature corridors is really important, and it's already happening. And of course, new build, you need to think about connecting your new build with all these pockets of green. And it's not only connecting and leaving. Well, you connect the pockets and green so wilderness can return. They have a place in our environment, but also is the leverage point 1, which was called cultivating biophilia. Biophilia, bio, life, philia, love for nature, love for life. There's something around, creating space for kids that are born in cities to nurture this love for nature through these pockets of green, because research tells, and many of the educators of last century, like Piaget, Montessori, and Steiner, they would say from 0 to 7 years old is when kids create their worldviews and the values are created. And if between 0 and 7 years old, they are given the opportunity or find enchantment in nature, in city, this means that later on in life, this will reduce disruptive behaviors in adolescence and the desire to control nature in adulthood, because as a child, you had that connection with nature in the cities.
Do we have another question? Yeah.
Hello, hi. Thank you so much for this evening. It's been a real pleasure to share it and hear from you. I sense that from the discussions that we're having and from what you're sharing, that we seem to be at a real exciting point of inertia of achieving a better society for everyone, really. I think about the UK cities that I've experienced that I know well, and where we are today, I sense that the places that are really getting it right now and that are really doing quite good stuff that is well aligned with the things that have been explored this evening are generally places that are more affluent. Do you think that's a fair statement? And I wonder if there are any places, particularly in Scotland, Edinburgh and Glasgow, that don't necessarily today align with that.
Yes, sure. In affluent areas, you have more time to think about. Is the Maslow pyramid of needs, right? But nevertheless, some of the social housing work that I've been doing, it's pretty amazing, the agency, because when government is not there, giving the hand, sometimes thank God is not there. There is also the awakening of the agency of, so for instance, Edinburgh, Western Hales, there's a whole movement there of greening and connecting the green spaces with natural medicine. And they have a health clinic there for all sorts of ailments, but also those who go to the health clinic, they can have the herbs that are really cultivated there, but they can give for 1, twice, 3 times. But then they say, would you like to learn how to grow your own herbs? So I would say there are pockets of action happening as well, very much from the agency, and I'll say that women have an important role on those aspects.
There is time for one more question. I read just here.
Hello, I've really enjoyed this evening's conversation. Thank you. I think it's been really provocative to focus on things, looking at it from a different angle. My dad was a post-Second World War architect, and I just wanted to share that if people don't know, Sighthill Nook in Edinburgh is unique because every building is completely different. They were all sample Scandinavian houses that were tried out at that time. But I do want to put one thing right. I think whilst we're talking about more of a gender focus towards women, the new towns of Scotland very much had families at their heart. And my dad was chief architect for Livingston Newtown, and the pavements were designed for prams and pushchairs and so on, and with nice destinations for families all of the time. So I feel that that has been borne out with the success of Livingston as a successful town between Glasgow and Edinburgh, so if people didn't already know about it. I think it's quite interesting, the conversation. I think there's a lot of post-pandemic stuff we need to talk about. I think so many key workers need to be located in the right place, in affordable and nice accommodation, and so many people from the City of London are working from Callaghomes and North Berwick at the moment. So there's a whole need to rethink everything once again, I think, for the future. But I really welcome today's conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing the memory of your father in Livingstone as well.
Can I just thank you very much, May. Would it be sensible for us to extend pavements for bicyclists and pram pushers as well as pedestrians, rather than mucking up the road system? Because an awful lot of car drivers are getting fed up with congestion and being stuck in traffic jams in places like Charlotte Square, where pollution is happening because they're stuck. And it might be sensible to extend the pavement and have the pavement shared between pedestrians and cyclists.
That's what I believe is happening in George Street. And certainly, I mean, yeah, as much as possible. I mean, if women design cities, roads will be for people, and cars will be invited as guests, and traffic would be evaporated.
Right, well, that sounds like a good place to end. For those of you who don't live in Edinburgh, you'll leave tonight and you'll find the pavements are absolutely empty tonight because something is happening in Cologne. 11 Scotsmen are trying not to make a mistake, which would be the first time in a very, very, very long time.
Yes.
This has been tremendous. Thank you very much. We all are thinking about the same things, really, and how we think about them and where we start. That's the whole point of this. Where you start is what's important. And let's hope we start in a better place than we have maybe in the past. With your help, maybe we will. Thank you.
Thank you. Tell us about the book.
I'm sorry, just to say we have books at the back that I think May will sign some if anybody wants to purchase them. Sorry, just want to put that.
Thanks to Kennox Asset Management.
Oh, please, can I have the fresh cards back?
Yeah, excellent. Well done. Good, good. Do you want to mix it yourself?
Thank you.
That's great.